I wonder if others had the same
I think
issue
we'll
I
go
did
ahead and
with.
get started.
Okay.
So this is the August 25th, 2022 TCOG meeting. Not sure if we have a quorum to vote on the minutes. We do? Okay. So you have 2 minutes. The one is really brief. The July
Yes.
26th meeting is basically to just say it happened. But then there's the June 23rd minutes. Would someone like to move both of the minutes?
Be happy to.
Cynthia, is there a second?
I'll
I
second
saw
him.
Joel's hand first. All those in approval, raise your hand or say aye.
Uh,
Looks like it's unanimous. Okay, good way to start a meeting. I know one of the discussion items we might just wait and have after we have the subcommittee reports, but let's start with focused on the July 26th meeting. It sounds like a number of folks did sit in on the broadband discussion. And I know when the town supervisors met a week or so ago, they thought it would be good to just hear from folks to see if there's obvious next steps to continue the discussion. I wasn't there at the meeting, although I have seen the presentation before. So Mark, I think it was you who suggested it would be worth having this on a TCOG agenda. Is there anything you want to say to help seed the discussion? And you're on mute, Mark.
I'm happy to unmute. Okay. Yeah, I don't.
We still can't hear you.
Oh, really?
I can.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Oh, you can hear him? How come I
Yes.
can't hear him?
I don't
Hello?
know. That's really weird.
Oh, I know why. Go ahead, Mark.
Are you good? Okay. Yeah, I wanted to make sure the conversation continued. We and Caroline are concerned about, I think, as all of you are, about, making sure that we have broadband for all. And there's the state initiative, and we're just trying to figure this out. So I thought the Hunt engineering report was really helpful. It made it clear there are different things, and we've been considering different things that a town or a municipality can do. And so I thought the memo that Katie Borgella sent out earlier this week was really relevant to this whole discussion and helpful. So yeah, I guess I had misunderstood. I thought we were going to have another presentation from Hunt, but I just do, urge. I just am trying to figure this out. I want to do something that is not necessarily the easiest or simplest thing to do, but is the best thing to do for the long-term interests of the town. And so, I think paying attention and seeing how the project in Dryden works out is really important. And yeah, I just and Katie's information was helpful in that, they're going to have a consultant who's going to be, sounds like, evaluating options that we can consider either individually or collectively. That's my big question. If there's something, that makes more sense to do with multiple municipalities. So those are my thoughts.
Great, Mark. And I have to admit, I saw what came from Katie, but I didn't have a chance to read it. And then I forgot to go back and read it. Can someone just summarize? Maybe Mark, you just did, because hopefully there's not going to be two separate tracks. Hopefully there's a way to combine initiatives moving forward.
Yeah, I summarized it pretty much how I remembered it.
Okay.
They are seeking information on broadband coverage in the municipalities, and I think Lansing and Danby have provided that information. I forwarded Katie information we received from Lee Hafley from a recent update that he did for Caroline. He approved that, and I provided that to Katie. So And I think their consultant is doing what Mr. Hafley did, which is boots on the ground assessment, looking at the infrastructure on the poles and things throughout the town.
And maybe this will relate when we talk about subcommittees. I don't know whether there's the potential that a subcommittee, even if it's ad hoc for a year, would come together to keep track of this information, keep moving it forward. So that might be one opportunity. But do others want to chime in who maybe sat in on the presentation on July 26th? Or, yeah, Joel?
You know, I saw Katie's memo and I read it, and it does indicate that they're, as Mark put it, you know, they're trying to get the same information countywide that we now have in Danby and Lansing, that you know, where the wired connections already are. And the thrust of it is so that when we know and can confidently say who's got it and who doesn't have it, come up with a plan for extending service to those that don't have it. But my sense is that there's the thrust of the county's effort is still to find I guess the cheapest way to get service to those that don't have it, and doesn't really address the cost or adequacy of the service that people already have. And that's part of what we were looking for in that HUT presentation. And I'm sort of in limbo. My sense is being somewhat adrift in this matter, in that HUT pointed to several sort of in between steps between simply paying for the current providers to extend their service to adjoining areas, which is kind of where we're headed, I think. On the one hand, versus the other option, the obvious option that Dryden has pursued in providing a municipal alternative to those ISPs. And that middle ground to me still feels kind of unexplored, despite what Hunt contributed to the conversation. And at least in Danby, I've established yet another committee to look at looking at that middle ground somewhat. And it seems to me that we all might profit from some collaboration in that kind of effort.
Other comments?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're gonna look at a different model than what we're doing, Madison, it sounds like you're thinking more like Madison County. So you might want to just reach out to them. The county was using ARPA money from the county plus the towns to help with that. But they're building backbone and middle mile for unserved, and then Empire Access is providing a service.
Bob?
I'm looking at the Nick Helmholt memo of the 22nd of August, and it looks like the county is proceeding toward basically a gap filling plan where we would find the consultant that they are retaining would identify areas that are unserved or underserved and try to fill in those gaps. And I don't see any talk in that memo of the kind of very ambitious plan that Jason has going out in Dryden, which I think is a totally different situation where you're not just trying to fill in gaps, you're trying to compete with an existing provider that you're not satisfied with. And certainly hearing that presentation again, if more people would attend, because the meeting we had in late July was very sparsely attended. And having that presentation at a TCOG meeting wouldn't hurt. I don't think that we in our town of Enfield are going to go the municipal broadband route simply because of the capital expense and simply because we have a fairly good provider in our part of the county. But nonetheless, other members might choose to benefit from the presentation, hearing it over again or exploring options that presentation in late July did not provide.
I just want to step in here and say that there's two things that we're looking at. One is getting everybody basic service, which is clearly a priority. But the other is talking about the needs of the future. And right now we got copper wire providing service for most people. And we really need to upgrade to fiber optics.
Right.
And I guess the question is kind of how often do we patch this roof and when do we stop and say, hey, we need a whole new roof because we can foresee that, you know, the rainstorms are going to keep getting worse. You know, the internet requires more and more bandwidth for individuals to be able to use it. And at some point, the cable system is going to be insufficient to provide adequate need for people. And I think we need to really think about the long term of putting in a real infrastructure that's planned as a whole community infrastructure and providing high speed, good quality internet, not just for now, but thinking for the future as well.
Mark?
Yeah, I agree with that. But for me, the key issue here is about, because Hafley has provided us a proposal, which would be fiber to the home. The core issue for me is whether we're going to continue on this path of financing a private company's infrastructure. I'm conflicted with that, and I think that's why I really want to look at more towards the end of the spectrum of what Dryden's doing to see if we could build something that works for the municipality's long-term interests. So,
And I'm kind of wondering whether we couldn't do both. Whether there wouldn't be a way to get service to those who don't have it and have that extensions become part of maybe a later on municipal system. Put in and have, instead of having the companies own the extensions, having us own the extensions, and let them use it until we get the rest of the thing up and running, something like that. Or maybe just subsidize Lightlink as an intermediary step. Not Lightlink, Starlink.
But that would be that would also be subsidizing a private enterprise. So
yeah, but
a very wealthy private enterprise.
Yes.
Starlink's not going to give you the fiber base, so no matter what you hear on Twitter.
So does anyone have a proposal for a next step?
I guess I liked Bob's idea of I don't if Hunt would be willing to present to TCOG, and also with what Joel said of maybe fleshing out the options a little more, that the intermediate options.
And so I know that most of the town supervisors have heard the presentation. And I don't know, of course, I probably the minutes. If I go back to the minutes for July 26, it probably tells me who was there. But so you're feeling there's enough folks who have not heard the presentation that it would be helpful to have at a TCOG meeting?
Well, I don't know whether it does. Do you think that, Mark? I mean, I was thinking.
No, I'm putting I don't know. Maybe that's a question right now for the group. So.
Yeah. I'm thinking that a committee, ought to focus on exploring those options. And essentially, I've created a committee in Danby, but I think my two people could easily collaborate with others who have shared interest on this. And maybe approaching Hunt about, looking at what those middle options are and how they might be integrated in our long-term plans.
Joel, could we make that the TCOG subcommittee that would basically be countywide, then have countywide membership?
Well, I mean, I certainly would welcome that if others are interested in participating.
And hopefully somebody from the county, Nick or somebody would sit in on that too, because seems like it would be important.
I agree.
Yeah, of course, we've been there before, but
Right.
I'd
Okay,
like
so
to have Nick talk about what he has put in this memo here and what the consultant that the county's retaining is going to do for us and help us fill in those holes that are unserved.
well, certainly I think we can take a couple of steps. When we talk about committees, we can decide if at least we start forming an ad hoc committee focused on this, and we can still invite Nick to give a present or an update at the, oh my God, I don't even want to say, is that October, at the October meeting?
Can't be true.
Yeah, okay. Is that enough for now then? Oh, and by the way, it was probably recorded, right? His presentation on July
Yes.
26th. So we can also, I think it should be easy to send out the link to that, right? For folks who didn't see it and want to hear it.
Right. In fact, that's exactly what I did with my prospective committee members. They look at this and then talk.
You can
So
go
I
ahead
I
and
think that's
send it.
excellent.
I can go ahead and send out an email with a link to that because it was on our YouTube channel.
That'd be great. Anything else about that right now? As I say, I think we'll talk about subcommittees in general after we have whatever subcommittee reports there might be. So this is one of our new ones. I'm glad Caitlin is on. So cybersecurity, and it's the longest.
Hi, everyone. Yeah.
Caitlin, you're coming across.
The longest name with the fewest. I apologize. I am in, hold on, give me just a sec.
Okay.
Okay. I apologize. I'm coming on the road back from Rochester. The subcommittee met. We have the longest name and the fewest members. So if there are other people who are interested, either on TCOG or we talked about bringing on some folks who might be on our boards or within our municipalities who have some interest in looking at this. When we met, our chief, we kind of identified that our chief goals were to identify particularly software that we might be able to either collaborate under the umbrella of the county, or in fact, there might be multiple municipalities without county support that might want to have some interest in going in on some shared licensing agreements, things like that. Because we talked about the high expense of software such for planning and zoning in particular. But we were talking about some other software that there might be some options where we could collaborate. So that's really where we started. We are thinking of would like to get some new members. And then just at the Tuesday town board meeting for Ulysses, we green lighted the RFP that Ulysses put together to look at to request services for cyber and technology upgrades to our town equipment that we've identified as necessary for meeting the comptroller's recommendations of vulnerabilities. And the comptroller report that we received on technology and IT was very much the boilerplate that the comptroller sent out. They've been sending out this boilerplate now for a number of years. And so it certainly wasn't a unique report to Ulysses. And so we think there will be some value in sharing with the other municipalities if there's anybody else who's interested. We're happy to send it out now that we've done it, because we worked very closely with Greg Potter at the county to make sure that because we don't have the expertise. And thanks to Rod too for sharing your IT person with us. Nobody at the town of Ulysses who was in the administration side is an expert. So it was really helpful to have somebody else with a technology background look at it and be like, yes, this is actually what you're asking for, and that matches with what you are hopefully going to get. So that's where we are right now. We're hoping it can be a useful document for other communities.
Questions for Caitlin? I think I saw a hand up. Where did they? Oh, hey, go ahead, Tim. And you're on mute.
Thanks. I was just going to say that if this develops, someone you might be interested in approaching for consultation is Tracy Matrano, who used to be the director of cybersecurity at Cornell and is one of the national leaders in this field. And probably most of you realize that Tracy ran for Congress 2 years ago. I think she's still living in Penn Yan, but she really, really knows her stuff and really plugged into the local thing. So if it got to that stage, I just recommend talking to her.
And I know she's just gone through some major health issues, but I think she's coming out okay. So that's good.
That's a great recommendation. I hadn't connected those dots. So thank you very much.
Other comments, questions? Anyone volunteering to be on the committee? It sounds like Caitlin's looking for additional folks.
What we were thinking was that they need not be TCOG members, but there might be others in other towns who would have the interest and could plug in.
When is your next, do you have a next meeting, Caitlin?
We don't have another meeting scheduled. I would just reach out to anybody who was interested and schedule according to that.
Okay.
If you could send around a brief description of your committee, I could pass it out to the folks in my town and see if there's any interest in them joining it.
Absolutely, I'll do that.
I think it might make sense to have that same message go to all the towns.
Right. So if you get it to Katrina, it can get sent out to the full list.
Sounds great. We'll do.
Okay. Caitlin, you're set for now?
I think so.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
So Mark, I don't know if you have anything to report on emergency planning and preparation.
I don't have anything new really, except to update. The committee did meet. We decided to push forward our presentation to the Public Safety Committee. So I think that's going to happen on September 15th now. And so we are, going to be presenting a brief presentation on the rural emergency services dilemma and proposed solutions. So, and I guess Rorden, would you like to follow up on that or embellish that at all? And Rorden has been central on this, so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much, it'd probably be premature to overly publicize kind of what we're working on, but essentially Mike Steitley, who's the Director of Emergency Response for Tompkins County, has an EMT background, and he's as concerned as we are about kind of the network of providing for ambulance services broadly in the area, not just in the county. And so we're in the very early stages of considering a proposal to the county that would include, hopefully, I don't know if there are any legislature members on this call, that would include the possibility of what we are referring to as medical rapid response, kind of a fly car model paramedic service that the county would put together to provide essentially mutual aid support to the existing ambulance agencies. Mike is not interested, nor do I think any of our agencies would be interested in the county creating an ambulance service. The price tag on that is astronomical, but we certainly would welcome, at least from Trumansburg's side of the lake, we would certainly welcome the mutual aid standby support. We, Village of Trumansburg, responded 11 times to calls within the city of Ithaca in the month of July because of bangs being under a lot of their own stress. I have reached out to Megan Bangs at Bangs Ambulance and have started conversations with her just about the coordination of the network. Of course, Dryden Ambulance is also the other kind of that side of the lake is the primary backup for Bangs. So that network, if just as by way of example, if the Village of Trumansburg is staging an ambulance at the hospital to back up Bangs, that means our contracted areas of coverage in Seneca and Schuyler counties have a longer response time. So if Tompkins County has the ability to stage someone at Dates Drive, and then we don't. So that kind of coordination is where Mike is coming from, and I'm thrilled that he's taken the active role that he has. And so at some point, there's going to be an actual pitch for a plan to the legislature. That some point could be 3 weeks from now at the Public Safety Committee meeting. And I would expect we would be back to this group to ask for all of your support, at least in concept, to how this would work. Because there's just tremendous strain. I'm not going to get on my soapbox about why all the whys, but there's just tremendous strain on that system right now. Last weekend was a heck of an example. If any of you want anecdotal evidence, I'd be happy to share it sometime. So that's where we stand.
Great. Thanks, Roden.
Any, Bob?
Yes, and this is very timely because Monday night, the Enfield supervisor and I had a discussion with an official of the Enfield Volunteer Fire Company, which they have a rescue corps, but they do not have an ambulance service. And one of the topics of discussion was the rather severe situation that we in Enfield are in, and other communities share that, with the shortage of ambulances being provided by our principal commercial supplier. And it was mentioned that Trumansburg ambulances have had to provide mutual aid for a number of calls in Enfield lately. And if Trumansburg is tied up, and if Bangs is tied up, that means an ambulance has to come clear from Dryden. And that's a long way with a long response time. So this is a very wise move to be advanced. And I think that we in Enfield would support Roden's efforts and the effort to establish some kind of a fly car system that would at least fill in the gaps when necessary.
Makes a lot of sense to me too. I think you're on the right track, Lord.
Anything else?
That's all from me.
Okay. The Energy Committee did meet since our last meeting, and solar development will be our focus for the immediate future, except for one tiny exception. That we did talk to, I can't remember Terry Carroll's new replacement.
Gina Cassidy?
No, not Terry, not his replacement, his new staff person at the county. Anyway, there's interest in electric vehicles. So they're going to try to put together some sort of show and tell of their electric vehicles. I know this, I think the city has some too. Anyway, so they're going to coordinate that. They'll get back to us. I think they're also going to try to keep us abreast of funding opportunities, grant opportunities related to EVs, which presumably over the next year, there will be more opportunities to purchase EVs. So stay tuned on that. We are planning.
Can I ask, are any towns using electric snowplows?
I don't think so.
Not yet.
Some of these are still, they're still being worked through the issues. But we have, our highway super does keep track of these things, and even some of the larger equipment, there will be possibilities, obviously more expensive, but possibilities coming down the pike. But costs will certainly be an issue. I know we had a presentation, Cynthia is aware of this. They looked into electric fire trucks. The cost was pretty high. So No surprise there. So and we'll send all this out. You don't have to take, I mean, I know it will be in the minutes, but we're planning a Zoom webinar on September 19th at 6:30. And it's got a great name that I won't remember right now, but the essence is for municipalities who have been involved in solar development to share lessons learned. I think the title is something about trials and tribulations of siting solar. And several municipalities are actually interested in sharing their experiences. So it would be a bit of a panel presentation and then certainly time for Q&A. And then in October, mid-October, we're planning a second Zoom webinar where we hope to line up reps of solar developers to talk about how they see working with municipalities. And we would also like NYSEG to be on the panel of that particular presentation. The county is also going to be offering, I don't know what the timeline is, Terry Carroll was mentioning this, some webinars related to solar, like battery storage. There's certainly things that we all need to be aware of as that becomes more prominent. So some of this will come from the county, but the Energy Committee of TCOG is going to work immediately on these two webinars. So one September 19th and one, and I think 6:30. I think we decided 6:30, and we don't see it as something that we would want municipalities to, it really is focused on elected officials, ZBA members, planning board members. You know, if some members of the general public hear about it and end up sitting in, that's fine, but that's not the targeted audience for this first one, or the one that we would do in October as well. And that will be clear in what we send out. So for those of you on the Energy Committee, anything you want to add to that? The good news is there are lessons to be learned in working with these solar companies. It will be interesting to see if when I start reaching out to reps of solar companies, whether they're, of course I want to be on a panel, or they'll be like, who else is going to be on the panel? So that will be, I'll be curious to see how that goes. So any questions about how we're moving forward with that committee? If not, I don't know, Bob, is there any Transportation Committee report?
I do have a few notes. Now, the Transportation Committee has not met since our last meeting because of summer vacation schedules and some people being out of the country. But we hope to meet in September and hope to have a report for you on that at the October meeting. However, I do have a number of notes because there has been some major news being made with regards to the TCAT transit service. It's experienced three major developments in my estimation since our last meeting. I'd rate one of them as positive, one of them as unfortunate, and the third one maybe as a work in progress. First, let's talk about the good news. On August 16th, the service announced the award of $8.74 million through the federal government's so-called No-Low grant program. The money will enable TCAT to purchase 6 full-size 40-foot electric buses and 4 smaller buses, 10 battery electric transit vehicles in total, and their overhead chargers. TCAT placed its first 7 electric buses into service in April 2021. It says it hopes to have its full 50 bus fleet electrified by 2035. I know that's a ways off, but it's a goal. TCAT indicates the procurement of these new buses will soon begin. It takes several months to manufacture the electric bus. TCAT's news release announcing this grant did not necessarily specify an expected delivery date for those buses. Now the unfortunate news. On August 17th, the TCAT board, following a well-reported public hearing 2 days earlier, voted unanimously to cut service on 4 principal bus routes for the current fall schedule. Our own Route 20 that serves Enfield is one of those affected, with Enfield Sunday service eliminated. Also affected were Route 11 to South Hill, where trips will run less frequently, Route 13 to Fall Creek, and perhaps most controversially, Route 82 to Cornell, where the frequency of service will be cut in half. Many concerns at the hearing focused on the Route 82 cuts, particularly service to the Maple Avenue apartments. TCAT officials insist the cuts are necessary, mandated by a combination of driver shortages and supply chain delays in getting spare parts for buses. Now the work in progress. On July 28th, the TCAT board took, in my estimation, its most significant action to date toward instituting universal fare-free service. In a resolution that, as I reported at the time, its 9 members massaged for more than an hour and watered down with every tortured amendment, the agency's board of directors adopted the goal of exploring the feasibility of going fare-free. That's a quote from the resolution. A number of wiggle words, to be sure, were added along the way. It's not the promise of free service that fare-free advocates would like, but as board member Jennifer Dotson remarked at the meeting, quote, "I think it's reasonable to point ourselves in a direction without knowing how this will turn out," close quote. The study's timetable calls for the feasibility study to be finished within the next 12 months. That's optimistic. Transit officials announced at their July 28th board meeting that ridership is rebounding from its pandemic slump. Year-to-date ridership for the first 6 months of the year increasing by 115%. Of course, that's coming out of the pandemic era. Monthly cost of fuel keeps climbing. During June, bus shortages were a far larger contributor to missed trips than were driver shortages. That's a change from the past. Bus shortages caused 66 missed trips that month. Driver shortages, only 10. And that's what I have to report, and we'll probably have more at the October meeting.
Any questions?
Thanks, Bob. That was great. And I'm really at the transit services meeting. The issue came up, or the topic of fare-free, evaluating that fare-free transit came up, and also I guess the fare boxes now are really old, so they're it's a pregnant topic because it would be a shame to invest in refurbishing or replacing the fare boxes if we're going to go fare free. So I'm really delighted to hear your report. So that's great.
I think in a committee meeting that they had that went along with the meeting they had about a week ago, it was mentioned that replacing the fare boxes would cost $1 million. I think that was mentioned, and that's awful expensive. And I wondered to myself, well, if you're going to go fare free, wouldn't it be wise to hold off replacing the fare boxes? So I agree with your point of view on that, but it's been a busy month for the bus service, and I can't take time to report everything that came out of those meetings. They're probably having a meeting as we are having a meeting right now. They usually have their monthly board meeting right along with ours. So I only get to visit every other month because I'm here with you this month. But in any event, they are making news.
Yeah. Also, great report on the grant for the electric vehicles. That's really amazing. So
that's good, and that will help out because those electric buses are very expensive.
I've been working in by location for years. If I ever perfect it, I'll give you the secret to how to do it, Bob.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of the advertising they've got on some of those buses, but that's another issue entirely that I commented on at I think at the July meeting of the TCAT board. But that's just a personal gripe on my part that I think we have to draw the line somewhere, and I think they've drawn the line somewhat in the wrong place.
Okay. Water quality, is there any report? I don't think there's an active water quality committee. Is that correct?
We kind of lost George. We kind of lost the committee with him.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. When George left, we never had anybody else that picked it up.
You know, and so Obviously, it's a struggle sometimes to find, as we've just heard, members for committees. But here we are talking about, are there other committees that we want to form, or some that we want to just drop off for now and come back to if there's interest? So, just as Caitlin had suggested, the cybersecurity one, and that's meeting. I think Caitlin had also, I forget where this one came from, but someone had said somewhere along the line that, issues that may come up in discussions sometimes play out differently, whether it's in a more rural part of the county, a more suburban part of the county, or in the city itself. I don't know what that committee looks like, but I just wrote down rural, urban, suburban. Stormwater has come up, but to me, that's sort of related to water quality. Adapting to climate change has come up. So this is just a time to have an open discussion about how we want to restructure ourselves. Cynthia?
Yeah, I haven't volunteered for the water quality committee. I was still trying to get a sense of what the committees did, and I'm not quite sure what the mission of the water quality committee has been. I would just like to say that I am the chair of the Tompkins County Water Resources Council. I'm also on the executive board of the Cuga Lake Watershed Intermunicipal Organization, which I know many of us are members of. And I would be happy to provide updates on the activities of those two organizations, although there might not be a committee per se, unless some of my colleagues would like to join in on a committee. But I was reluctant to bring myself forward because I wasn't quite sure what the mission or goal of the committee was when it was created. If you like, I can provide a brief summary of recent activities, but I wouldn't mind hearing about what led to the creation of the Water Quality Committee when it was formed.
I don't know. Does anyone else know?
Predates me.
I can try to speak to that. And I think the idea was we're a county that has a big lake going through many of the municipalities, and we all should be, keeping that in mind. And what ended up happening essentially was what you're offering to do, Cynthia, is we got summaries from what, the groups that have been working on this are doing. And that might just be the best thing for this group, is to be, getting updates on a regular basis, not necessarily even every meeting, so that we're aware of issues that are coming up and aware of the work that's being done, so that can filter back into our communities, and leave it at that.
Okay, if you like, I'm happy to continue in that role. I can give a few minute review. This will be coming completely off the top of my head, so I know I'm probably going to be missing a lot of things. The Cuga Lake Watershed Intermunicipal Organization, as you know, Cuga Lake is the largest watershed of all the Finger Lakes in the region. We have over 60 municipalities that feed into the watershed and 6 different counties. The IO, or QIO as it is called, has recently initiated a fair funding formula and asking all of the member municipalities to make a contribution based on this new calculation. And the purpose of that is to help fund basically a watershed manager. We are the only watershed without a manager. That manager was just hired. And her name is Erin, and I forgot her last name. She's basically being housed in the Finger Lakes Institute, which is a wonderful organization willing to offer her a space and a computer and a desk. Ian Smith, who's the watershed manager, I believe, for Seneca Lake, is there also. So there's some synergies there. And basically, the main goal is to increase collaboration amongst the 60 municipalities, assist smaller municipalities in obtaining grants, encouraging projects to come forward that will help across the watershed. As you know, many of these projects are impacted and don't abide by municipal boundaries, so that the more that we can bring smaller municipalities with limited resources bring them and working together and applying for grants and implementing projects. It's for the benefit of the lake. We did have our first in-person meeting in over 2 years at the Seneca Lake, Cayuga Lake State Park. I got to meet a lot of people for the first time who I've only seen over Zoom. And it's wonderful to see more and more municipalities getting involved. I actually met the county supervisor, I believe, for Seneca County. They have actually taken the step where Seneca County is paying for all the fees for not only the county, but the villages and towns in Seneca County to participate in the IO. He basically informed me that they are paying for it out of their room tax because they recognize that it leads to supporting their tourism industry if they can have a clean and vibrant lakefront. So they are paying for all of their municipalities. So that is just a quick update on that. The city of Ithaca, as well as several water purveyors in Tompkins County, are undergoing what's called a WSP2 program, Drinking Water Source Protection Program. And this is a program that is basically put forward by New York State, encouraging water purveyors to come up with protection plans for their watersheds. These put forward outlines, guidelines, advise each purveyor to have a watershed manager. The city is actually going to be one of the first, I think. City of Ithaca is going to be one of the first water purveyors in New York State that is going to be accepting its plan. It's right now going through the public hearing process. You can see it online through the city website. It's incredibly detailed, and we had the benefit of Liz Moran, I believe. I want to say Barton LeJudas, who helped us go through the process of identifying sources of contamination, threats to the watershed throughout the 6 Mile Creek watershed, mapping that, and then putting together proposals of strategies of how to protect our drinking source from contamination and runoff, working with our neighboring municipalities. So Bolton Point is going through the same process, as is Cornell. They're several months behind the city. I'm trying to think through, just recently, not at this month's Water Resources Council, but at last month's Water Resources Council meeting, we had a wonderful presentation by Steve Penningroth, who is with the Community Science Institute, who does studies looking at all of our various tributaries, not only in Tompkins County and surrounding counties throughout the watershed, helping to identify sources of phosphorus and nitrates and contaminants into the lake. Wonderful presentation. I believe you can find it through the Water Resources Council agenda, where you can see the data that he put forward, as well as recommendations to each county of what they can do to address water quality in their municipality. So yeah, that's where we are in a quick summary. But I think, as we've all mentioned, this is going to be, I think, even more of a pressing issue. I think New York Times just recently reported that there were, I believe, 5 1-in-1,000-year flood events in the United States just in the last month. So these rain events, flooding events, are becoming more prevalent, more frequent. The better we can be in being proactive about addressing stormwater runoff. How can we preserve our green space? How can we manage our emergency resources? It will be better for our community and our residents to be thinking forward in this way. And as you mentioned, Rod, water quality management is the first step in that direction. So I do think that this would be a good committee to keep going and to have everybody involved or aware of what's going on.
And as you suggested, even if for a little while it's you just reporting on some of these other activities, that's great. So let's open it up to our current committees, potentially new committees. Thoughts?
I think that Alderperson Brock just auditioned very well to be chair of the Water Quality Committee. Did a very excellent job, and if she were willing to do that, I would put feelers out to some of my colleagues in Enfield. Perhaps the supervisor, who is an alternate member of TCOG, would like to serve on a Water Quality Committee because she's very concerned about that. We do have our own Water Quality Committee in Enfield. That's a lay committee that the supervisor sits on. And we are very concerned in our case about groundwater, about the aquifer that we have, because we don't have a municipal water supply. Well water is the only thing we have in Enfield, and we want to make sure it's preserved. So if that were to continue, I would put a suggestion out to members of our Water Quality Committee to see if anyone would like to serve as a member of that committee as an off-TCOG member.
Well, I can't remember if we ever did this. A few meetings ago, we talked about each committee would give a description of what their focus is, what they're about, and that full list would get sent out to TCOG so that we could share it with other municipal members or folks that we thought might be interested. I saw Katrina, I think I saw you shake your head no. So that we can still get back to that idea. So Cynthia, I don't know if you're willing to do what Bob just said, but you know, if we, for the committees that we are trying to attract members to, if there's a description of what the focus might be, or even if it's like, you know, there's possibilities, we would wait until folks who are interested in this topic come together as a committee to decide what to focus on initially. That's what we've done with the Energy Committee, because each year we kind of decide, you know, is there a new focus that we should have, and the members chime in. So I think that's probably something we should try to do again do sometime this fall, just get descriptions of existing committees, but potential new committees as well.
I guess to that, my question would be, how would be, so we have in the Tompkins County Water Resources Council, which is a fairly large and diverse council, experts. We have several staff members there, as well as individuals from throughout Tompkins County. And there are subcommittees on that council that work on many of the issues that people have particular interest in, whether it's pertaining to the aquifer and groundwater studies, and how can we support best practices as well as model legislation that different municipalities in the county could adopt in order to protect their groundwater supply. I would strongly suggest maybe a conversation we could see if the Water Resources Council would be something that would be of most benefit for them. Because these are very, very important issues, and being able for the Water Resources Council to be able to push out into the municipalities all of these, not only the resources, but the recommendations and how we can work together, that might be a good use of our time and energy. But Robert, I'd be happy to speak to your contact and explore this further.
You know, and maybe we think about it in a slightly different way. So it might be subcommittees, but also just subcommittees and reports, because there might be times that one of us is sitting on, some committee or group that we just use this forum to report on, not trying to come up with yet another group that might, I know we all want to avoid duplication, and there's plenty to think about, but maybe it's not always a model of a subcommittee of TCOG trying to work on something. Mark? You're on mute, Mark.
Great. Yeah, I agree with that. And that's kind of what I heard Cynthia, if I heard right, saying that that with the IO and the Water Resources Council, yeah, that it doesn't make sense to duplicate, to create a committee that duplicates their efforts or whatever. And I think getting reports and staying connected with them might be a really good thing. But we also in our town have we call it the Watershed Committee, and it's just a citizen advisory group that it sounds like others have, and we're just sort of continually trying to keep abreast of really most of them are stormwater erosion issues in the town with 6 Mile Creek here. And advising, either advising residents or initiating town initiatives if there's a threat to town infrastructure. And that's that's why I really appreciate what the IO is doing to do this in a comprehensive way across the watershed. So
Maybe the term we're looking for instead of another committee is just a liaison position in which Cynthia, reports back and forth between the two groups and make sure that we're on the same page on this very important issue. Because I agree, it doesn't seem like we need another committee working on it. It seems like we need to make sure IO is getting all the support that it needs to do the work that it's been working on for a long time.
Well, and likewise to connect interested members with the committees that actually have the resources and expertise in order to assist them, because there is so much going on and synergies that could be occurring. So Mark, as you mentioned, whether, your watershed, you are in the city of Ithaca's 6 Mile Creek watershed. So for example, when the DWSB2 plan is accepted by the city, it then makes your watershed maintenance projects more eligible for funding because it will now be fitting into our watershed management plan for our water supply. So the more we can collaborate and work together and be aware of the resources that are available to us, the easier it will be to implement the kind of projects that are so necessary in order to protect our natural areas. So I think that's a great idea.
great.
Joel?
The scope of the Water Resources Council, is that countywide essentially?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we have some subcommittees on aquifers, subcommittees dealing with, stormwater, we have multitudes of subcommittees with, again, staff specialists that help support those endeavors.
So Cynthia, if we develop this list of committees, in your case, it might just be telling people what that group does and what some of the subcommittees are, in case anyone's interested in connecting with one of those existing subcommittees.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. And it sounds like there's interest in forming the broadband committee. Again, sometimes these committees can be ad hoc. I mean, I don't know how long the broadband committee would need to meet, but it sounds like there's a number of things that folks are hoping to have a discussion about. So is there somebody willing to kind of be the lead for that broadband committee and pull together who's ever interested?
I guess that would be me, wouldn't it?
Oh, I thought it was going to be Mark. You're letting Mark off the hook.
I was waiting for Joel to speak up.
I'm happy to be on it, but I don't have time to organize it.
So Joel and Mark, we'll let you figure out how to.
Yeah, maybe we'll co-chair it.
That's a good idea.
Are there others that topics that people want to throw out just for discussion purposes at this point, Mark?
I would just like to mention that of course, I think it's apparent that I want to continue the emergency services planning group. I think we're making progress. It's a very capable group, and I'm learning a lot. So I want to keep that in place. So
Yeah, and I see the energy committee staying in place too. And we just formed the cybersecurity, so Caitlin's just looking for additional members. So it sounds like, without putting words in, Bob, it sounds like you're willing to kind of play the role that Cynthia is willing to play on water for transportation for now.
Right, I'm willing to do that. I
Okay.
also think definitely we need to have an emergency services committee, because that's one of the highest priorities we have out in Enfield, is that. So please keep that going.
Tim.
It was either last month or the month before, we brought up again the notion of code officer sharing.
Yes.
Collaboration. Is that still on the table?
Yeah, so there was no one from the county who was available to give an update today. So we're asking for an update on that. Where are they with that study, that survey, at the October meeting?
Great, that's great, because I think that's really important.
Any other topics that people want for committees to throw out as possibilities?
The only question is broadband, and I don't know what we want to do with that in the future. That would be the only additional one I can think of.
Yeah, and so Mark and Joel are gonna start moving that forward. It would be great if we're able to get descriptions of
All right.
these groups, subcommittee, however you want to frame them, within the next month, so that they can be sent out to TCOG before our October meeting. And again, the point is that you can share that with folks in your own municipalities in case they want to be on one of these committees, because I think all these committees are open to citizens being on them as well as elected officials. Is that correct?
Right, and we definitely need somebody on transportation, because right now one of our people resigned, and the other two people are not members of TCOG, which is all right, but we really need some additional perspectives there.
So if those of you who are in a position to put together a description could and send, that would be great.
Thank you.
Is there anything else about committees right now? And I see, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just going to say, these are great committees, and so I think it's a meaty packet of committees. So,
and I see that I skipped things at the very beginning. We were supposed to review the agenda, but we can certainly see if there's anything that wasn't on the agenda that people wanted to raise today. We've already mentioned at least one thing that we're hoping will be on the agenda for October, and that's the code enforcement study. Are there other items that people hope to see on October besides subcommittee updates? Mark?
I'll just mention the one thing that you and I talked about from the last supervisors meeting, that possibly maybe a discussion with highway superintendents about options or recommendations or strategies for equipment management and procurement and sharing and whatever.
Yeah, and Mark, so yes, thank you for reminding me. What were we thinking that was going to look like? Was it going to be during one of these meetings, we were going to invite in our highway counter, from each municipality? Was it that we were going to have some sort of conversation first? Remind me how we were thinking of moving forward on that.
Yeah, I don't know really. I just, we mentioned it briefly. And so a couple of you, recommended connecting with your highway units and getting thoughts. I just thought I'd throw it out if you thought that would be if a gathering at a TCOG meeting would be a good way to go, or I don't know.
So thoughts?
I would suggest that getting highway people at a TCOG meeting would be really difficult. At this time of the day, they're usually out in the middle of some project, and it's hard to get them to break off, go find a place to do a Zoom call. I think if you want to meet with highway people, you're doing it at like 7 or 8 in the morning when they're just getting their plans together, can do the meeting before they start working on any of the projects.
Don't they have regular, aren't they having regular county meetings anyway?
Mm.
Well, I do know because I asked they do meet. I just don't know how often they meet. It sounded like it's maybe more informal than I thought it was in
Mhm.
terms of them coming together. We certainly know that, people have established relationships. So when it comes to sharing equipment, they'll reach out and have conversations. But I think Mark's talking about a slightly bigger picture. Maybe we need to talk to I just forgot his name, who's in charge of county, Jeff,
Yeah.
County Highway, to talk about, do you guys meet? So maybe we can at least, Mark, start getting some information,
Mhm.
see what kind of networking is already happening, and if there's something missing.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a touchy enough subject amongst them that if we haul them in for a big meeting, we could be in for a big surprise.
Well, I'm happy to reach out to Jeff just to say this got raised. We're just trying to find out how you guys connect.
Yeah.
So I'll at least start that, Mark,
Yeah.
and maybe something will materialize between now and some sort of way
Sure.
forward between now and when we meet again in October.
And maybe he has a recommendation. So,
And Mark,
He might be willing to come and talk about, maybe that's what I asked him, can you just tell us how the yacht network among the municipalities?
that might seem like the best affirmative first step.
Okay, so
And then
I'll
we could
reach
have
out
a
to Jeff.
conversation about how to move forward with a more concentrated equipment sharing idea.
Were there other potential topics for October at this point? Things seem to come up in between meetings, so I'm not worried if we don't have a lot right now, because things certainly, but if you know of something now, would be good to be planning toward it.
Well, as Mark remarked, you get a pretty meaty set of committees. So hopefully something will come out of that.
There's a reminder here. The Housing Affordability and Supportive Infrastructure Grant Program.
Yeah,
So I think we all got emails from Darby about that recently. Is that correct?
yes.
Okay. Is there anything else that we need to talk about today? It's August, so it's okay if we end early.
Right.
Is there anything else that we need to talk about today? Ron, do you want to put in a plug for the Trumansburg Fair, which is underway, correct?
The Trumansburg Fair is underway. And if you would like to come and visit the fair, there are plenty of restaurants and fine dining establishments in Trumansburg for you to visit after the fact. How's that?
This is how we should end each meeting. Give a municipality a chance to do a little promotion about something. So good, we got that started. So anything else? If not, we'll adjourn the meeting. Everyone enjoy the evening.
great.
Thank you.
care.
Thanks, Rod.
Bye. All right.